California spends billions on homelessness. New agencies, new programs, endless plans. And yet, you walk through Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, and it looks worse, not better. So stop asking soft questions. Not why is this happening? Ask this instead. What if the system in California isn't designed to solve homelessness, but to manage it? Because if that's true, everything you're seeing suddenly makes sense. Welcome back to the American Backdrop. If you want to see how policies, culture, and money affects your everyday lives, you are in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and let's get into it. You don't need a report to understand this. You just need to walk outside. You go through parts of Los Angeles, you go through parts of San Francisco, and the reality is right there in front of you. Tents, encampments, people living on sidewalks, under overpasses, near businesses, near homes, and at the same time, you're constantly hearing about funding, new budgets, new initiatives, new announcements. So the disconnect hits you immediately because both things are happening at the same time. Spending goes up, visibility of the problem goes up, and that creates this quiet question that most people feel but don't always say out loud. Where is the money actually going? And I'm not saying nothing is being done. That's not fair. There are outreach teams, there are shelters, there are services. People are working. Effort exists. But effort and results are not the same thing. That's where it starts to feel off. Here's what it looks like in real life. A new program gets announced. It sounds good, it has a name, it has funding, it has press behind it. Months go by, you drive through the same area, and it looks exactly the same. Maybe even more homeless. Maybe new homeless have showed up. And you start to realize something. The system moves, but the outcome doesn't. Now hold on, let me be fair. Homelessness is not one problem, it's multiple things stacked together. Housing costs, mental health, addiction, economic pressure, sometimes bad decisions, sometimes bad luck. It's not clean, it's not simple. But here's the thing, complexity explains why something is hard. It doesn't explain why it stays stuck. Because over time, you start seeing a pattern, not a conspiracy, a pattern. Programs expand, budgets increase, more organizations get involved, and yet the number of homeless doesn't move the way you would expect it if the system was actually solving the problem. So this is where it flips. Instead of asking, why isn't it fixed? You start asking, what is the system actually built to do? When the spending grows and the problem grows with it, that's not random. That's the signal. So how the system actually works in real life? Money flows into the system from multiple directions. Local government, state funding, federal programs. That money doesn't go straight to solve homelessness in one clean step. It moves through layers. Agencies, departments, contractors, nonprofits, service providers. Everyone has a role. Everyone has a budget. Everyone has a piece of the process. Now, on paper, that sounds structured, organized, coordinated. But here's where things start getting interesting. Think about it. In California, homelessness funding is tied to activity, not results. That's the part nobody wants to say out loud. If you run outreach in Los Angeles or San Francisco, you can show numbers, contracts made, services offered, people moved into temporary shelters. That's what gets reported. That's what keeps the money coming in. But actually getting someone off the street permanently, that's not what the system is built around. There is no incentive structure pushing hard towards that outcome. Because once the problem is solved, the funding slows down. Who would want that? So the system stays focused on what keeps it alive. Activity, programs, constant movement, not ending the problem. Let me give you a scenario that might explain why homelessness doesn't end. Imagine you're running an organization. You have staff, you have overhead, you have operations. Your funding depends on showing that you're active, that you're engaged, and that work continues. So there's pressure to maintain that flow. Because if the problem shrinks too much, your funding shrinks with it. And that's exactly what's happening with homelessness outreach programs. Now, I'm not saying people are sitting in a room saying, let's keep this going forever. That's not how it works. Maybe it does. It's more subtle than that. It's incentives, quiet, built-in incentives. The system rewards continuation. And once that structure is in place, it builds on itself. More programs get added, more coordination layers get added, more reporting systems, more oversight groups, and every layer has a cost. So now, instead of direct path from funding to solution, you have a network. And networks are hard to simplify. They don't naturally collapse, they expand. Now, here's another part people don't always think about. Temporary solutions become the default. Shelters, transitional housing, service programs. These are necessary, don't get me wrong, but they only manage the situation. They don't end it. So what happens when a homeless is moved from the street into a temporary setup? That counts as progress. It gets reported, it gets funded. But if a homeless cycles back out later, the system absorbs that too. Another data point, another case, and the funding cycle continues. To be fair, again, there are real barriers. Housing supply is tight, costs are high, mental health services are not always accessible. Addiction complicates everything. So yes, it's difficult. But here's what that misses. Difficulty doesn't explain why the structure leans towards maintenance instead of resolution. Because if you step back, the pattern becomes clearer. The more complex the system becomes, the harder it is to measure real success. And when success becomes unclear, continuation becomes the default. The system isn't built to end the problem. It's built to keep operating around it. Now, when something becomes an ecosystem, not just a program, it develops its own stability. Jobs depend on it. Budgets depend on it. Entire departments depend on it. And once that happens, reducing the problem doesn't just solve homelessness. It disrupts the system itself. And systems don't naturally disrupt themselves. So what does this funding cycle create over time? This is where it starts affecting people beyond the issue itself. First, trust. Over time, people see the same pattern again and again. Funding increases, announcements get made, progress is promised, but daily reality doesn't shift in a noticeable way. So people start pulling back, not loudly, quietly. They stop believing that solutions are coming. And when that happens, something changes in behavior. People disengage, they stop paying attention, or they go the other direction. Frustration builds, anger builds, because it starts to feel like the system is talking but not delivering. Now, hold on. This isn't about saying nothing works. Some people do get help. Some programs do move people forward. That's real. But when the overall picture doesn't improve, those wins don't scale. So culturally, something else happens. The problem becomes normalized, not accepted, but expected. You drive past it, you see it, it becomes part of the environment. And that's a dangerous shift. Because once something becomes normal, the urgency around solving it drops. Not officially, but in behavior, in attention, and accountability. Now, let me give you a simple real-life pattern. Someone votes for a funding measure, they support it, they believe it will help. Time passes, nothing really changes. Maybe it gets worse. Next time something comes up, that person hesitates, or they stop engaging completely. That's how trust erodes, not in one moment, over time. And inside the system, something else is happening. Programs that were supposed to be temporary become permanent. Emergency measures become standard operations, and failure gets reinterpreted. Not as failure, but as we need more funding. Now, sometimes that's true, but sometimes it becomes the default explanation. And when that becomes the default, accountability starts fading. Because if the answer is always more, then there's no clear point where you say, this isn't working. When failure keeps getting funded, it stops being failure. It becomes infrastructure. All right, back to the point. Over time, the system stabilizes around the problem instead of eliminating it. It becomes predictable, structured, continuous. And once something becomes continuous, it's no longer treated like a problem to solve. It's treated like a condition to manage. That's the shift most people don't notice right away. And once that shift happens, everything else follows. Policies focus on mitigation, programs focus on maintenance, outcomes become harder to define, and the original goal, actually solving homelessness, moves further away, even if everyone still says it's the goal. Look, this isn't about saying we shouldn't be helping homeless. That's not the point. The point is asking a harder question. Why does the help not translate into fixing homelessness at scale? Because until you look at incentives, you're only looking at the surface. If the system awards activity more than outcomes, if funding depends on continuation more than completion, if entire structure depends on the problem existing, then the system doesn't have a natural reason to solve it. And that's uncomfortable because it means the issue isn't just resources, it's design. Real solutions would require something different, fewer layers, clearer accountability, measurable outcomes tied to permanent change, and probably a willingness to shrink parts of the system once the problem starts going down. But that's the part nobody talks about, because solving the problem doesn't just change the streets, it changes the structure built around it. And remember, in California, homelessness isn't just a crisis. It's a funded industry. Too many hands are in it. Too many incentives are tied to it continuing. You don't solve a crisis by building an economy that feeds off the crisis. Because when people start benefiting from the problem, ending it stops being the goal. And that's the American backdrop. Stay sharp, stay aware, and start holding people in power accountable, because this isn't confusion. It's mismanagement at best and corruption at worst. Billions are spent, results don't follow, and the same leaders keep asking for more. At some point, that's not a mistake. That's the choice. See you in the next one.